Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In 2018, the Pocophone F1 landed. Now this was officially named the flagship killer. You can actually pick this up now in 2021 for $179.99 from eBay. That's where I got this one from. 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigabytes of internal storage. But now in 2021, we have the POCO F3. Now for £349 you can get the 8 gig and 256 gigabyte storage version. Now box is very similar, the black and yellow sort of combination that they're still doing to this day. Slightly smaller box for the POCO F1 in terms of height, but narrower on the F3. So there's not much that separates them in terms of what you get in the box. The F3 and the F1 both have USB Type-C cables. The F1 has 18 watt fast charging and the F3 has 33 watt fast charging. So even in 2018, 18 watts fast charging back then was pretty fast. I mean, it's still fast today, but obviously compared to the chargers you are getting today, 33 watts and some up to 60 odd, then yeah, this does look a lot slower. In terms of battery capacity, the POCO F1 came with the 4000 mAh battery and the F3 had 4520. Okay, so we have both phones here, and the first thing you notice is the POCO F1 is quite a bit smaller in terms of height. There is a thick bezel at the top and a thick bezel at the bottom, whereas the F3 has quite narrow bezels all the way around. I think the sides in terms of bezels are similar to the F1 and F3. But yeah, the forehead and the chin is a little bit big. The F1 looks slightly thicker as well compared to the F3. F3 comes shipped with MIUI 12, F1 MIUI 9, but on the F1 I believe it does go up to MIUI 12 on Android 10. So you have a plastic back on the F1 and a glass back on the F3. The F3 is obviously really glossy. It's going to pick up lots of fingerprints as well. So yeah, I do prefer the back on the Pocophone F1. There's no fingerprints picked up on there. I just think it looks really, really smart. So let's compare both of them a little bit closer. Obviously the camera array on the F3 is bigger than the F1 as well. And in terms of weight, this is 182 grams and this is 196. There's a slight bit more weight in the POCO F3, but to be fair, it's not really noticeable when you're holding the two together. So side profile there, so similar power volume rocker on the side. On the top, so you still have 3.5mm socket on the F1, which you don't on the F3. And here's the bottom, both USB Type-C, and we have speakers, grills at the bottom as well. So in terms of display, this is where obviously the POCO F3 is going to smash it out of the park with that AMOLED 120Hz refresh rate display. On the POCO F1, it's just the IPS LCD panel with a 1080p resolution. And it's got Corning Gorilla Glass 1, the first edition. On the POCO F3, we have Corning Gorilla Glass 5, both with 1080p resolutions though. 6.18 inch screen on the F1 and a 6.67 inch on the F3. Okay, so I've got both phones now on MIUI 12. Okay, let's whack the brightness up on both. There are the displays. Now, looking at both displays, obviously this is an AMOLED 120 Hz. Look how smooth that is nice and smooth. But to be fair, the LCD panel doesn't look bad. It's nice and bright. Not as smooth. See if we can sort of do it together. Ooh. There's more apps on the F3 to scroll through, you know, but you know, there you go. Don't look too bad. Obviously the horrible little cutout there at the top, which does show its date, obviously 2018. So what sets these apart quite massively is the Snapdragon 870 on the F3 and the Snapdragon 845 on the F1. 3 years difference, but we can just do a quick test and opening apps. So the camera program there, neck and neck. We have Chrome, slightly won the F3. We can try the Play Store, although I'm not logged in. That was pretty rapid on both. No sort of noticeable differences there. Settings. You know what I mean? Not much in it really, just for general testing like this, you know? Got it. So could you really tell the difference, you know, when actually using them? So it took me a while to get this up to MIUI 12. We're on 12.0.3 on the F1 and 12.0.5 on the F3. Look at all specs in there. All looking good. And now we have the gestures as well working on the F1 and obviously the F3 as well. So obviously the gestures and everything, this brings this right back or right into 2021. It's just the hardware that's obviously limiting the F1 now. Now the main thing I wanted to test is the cameras. Now I noticed on the F1, when this was on MIUI 11 and I went into video mode, let's check video mode, and video mode on here on the F3. Yeah, we're in video mode. So the F1 can shoot up to 4K 60. Yeah, let's zoom in on there a little bit. 4K 60 on the F1 and only 4K 30 on the F3. Now let me tell you this, on MIUI 11, there was stabilization on the F1. Now it's on MIUI 12, they've disabled stabilization at 4K 60, which I'm very disappointed about. Now the stabilization in 4K 30 on the F3, which that's standard. So yeah, I was really annoyed about that. Why have Poco removed the stabilization 4K 60 on the F1? So if you've got it, roll back to MIUI 11 and you'll have 4K 60 with stabilization. Yeah, so that's the recording formats on the rear. 4K 60, 4K 30, all the way down to 720, 30 FPS. Obviously you have the macro setting on the F3, which me personally, I'm not too bothered about. We have a 48 megapixel sensor there on the F3. With the F1, that's just a 12 megapixel sensor. But if you don't choose the 48 megapixel on the F3, then photos will come out at 12 megapixel anyway. So they're both going to be 12 megapixel pictures coming from these phones. Okay, so I just want to quickly test the fingerprint sensor on lock speed. So I've got my finger registered on there and my thumb registered there. Let's see what we get. Missed it on there. In all fairness, they're pretty much neck and neck. It was just me being clumsy at first. Look at that, you know. You can't call it at all. Perfect. So I mean, the main reason for this video was to see if the POCO F1 was still usable in 2021, and I think it is, isn't it? So let's have a look at some pictures and videos and set my contraption up. Okay, so we're going to start off here. We're in normal photo mode. There's HDR auto on, 9:16 aspect ratio, and quite a challenging picture, I think, this really. So pointing directly at a window. I mean, first look on here looks better on the F1, although it looks brighter on the F3. So let's take a photo and have a look. So what do you guys think to that then? So the F3 is more exposed, but I think I'm preferring the F1 on that one there. So now we're on this selfie cam. Let's turn beauty mode off on there. So beauty mode should be off. So they both have front facing 20 megapixel sensors. You can see first look on here, I'm preferring the look on the F3. I don't think the camera's in focus much on the F1. Let me just keep it exactly the same if possible. So I'm going to shoot it from there. So yeah, I think the F3 is much better. Saturation as well, look at the green on the card. The camera's not in focus really on the F1, that text is much more sharper on the F3. So I'd definitely give it the F3 on that one. Okay, so the F1 and F3 both have portrait capabilities. Looking at it live now on the F3, I think it looks better in terms of saturation and colour. Let me snap now on the F3, then the F1. Cool, let's have a look. Okay, so both in focus, which is fine, but yeah, I prefer the F3. I think the saturation, the colour accuracy is good, nice detail, washed out on the F1, most definitely I think there. So these pictures side by side, F1 and the F3, I think just comes down to personal taste really. I think I prefer the POCO F1 here. Now there is definitely a clear winner on the front facing camera. The F3 does have the better sensor, it handles exposure much better, and obviously you can see the blue sky saturation and stuff, and the colour in the face is much better on the F3 than the F1. So obviously there's going to be progression there. It's been 3 years, hasn't it, since the first one was released. So obviously there is good progression. And on the rear sensor, I think the F3 has won this one as well. Much more saturation you can see in the shed and the chair as well. Obviously not taking away the F1, the detail is there, but it's just more washed out on the F1 than compared to the F3. This side by side, again more saturation, slightly better colours there on the F3. This sand pit, couldn't really call it really. I mean, the F3, if you look at the top right, the colour exposure is slightly blown out there on the F3, so the F1 is exposed much better there. And this one here, so yeah, better saturation and colours in the F3. But, you know, the F1 is not too far behind. I wouldn't say it's 3 years behind. Okay, so we have 1080p 60 on the Pocophone F3. There's no stabilisation settings in the POCO F3 for 60 FPS. And on the F1, we have 30 frames per second with no stabilisation either. And looking straight away, you can see the F3 has the better sensor on the front-facing camera. Colour, detail, saturation is nice. I just look a little bit washed out on the F1 there, as you can see. I'm pretty sure everyone will agree with me on this one. Look at the back as well, it's quite blown out at the back. So on the F3 it's exposing the light above my head quite well and my face. On the F1 it's quite blown out there at the top. Okay, so on the Pocophone F1 on the left we have 60 frames per second and 4K, and on the F3 it's 4K 30. Now there's no stabilisation in the Pocophone F1, but there is a 4K 30 on the F3. So a quick test here. I do prefer the look of the F1. Let's get a little bit closer there. I mean, that's probably just down to personal preference. You might prefer the F3. I don't know. What do you guys think to this then? I also noticed the F3 is more zoomed in, more sort of cropped in than the F1. If you notice that. Interested to hear what you guys think. So we'll look up there. Bit of light and other subjects in there to see what it how it exposes. F1's not focusing much there, and there's a little bit of wobble in there. Let's just touch the F1. Yeah. I can't believe Poco removed stabilisation at 4K 60. Why? Now this is indoors 4K 30 on both, but I just realised the Pocophone F1 doesn't have stabilisation in 4K 30 either. So the MIUI 12 has ruined the POCO F1. So as you can see, the POCO F3 has much steady movement on camera. So obviously this is lower light scenario as well. I think the POCO F3 is handling it a little bit better. Yeah, that wobble in the F1 is a shame. So I'm trying to hold this as tight as possible, this little contraption I've got. So again, 4K 30. Let's see what the kids are doing. Now the kitchen's being exposed. Alright, on both. And now we're outside. 4K 30. You alright?
Yeah.
Just doing a camera test, mate.
I don't want to be in it. Please.
Too late, you're in it. Yeah.
Yes. I'll show you where it is. What phone?
So 1080p 60 on both now. No stabilisation either. The F3 is struggling to focus on that fence compared to the F1. So no stabilisation. Which one do you prefer? I think I prefer the F1. Colour and saturation. Both don't have stabilisation at all at this setting. You can see the wobble. I think I prefer the F1 there. Let me know what you think. Okay, 1080p 30 frames per second with stabilisation now enabled on both of them. What blue sky do you like best? I'm walking. F1 doesn't look as stable as the F3. The stabilisation system in the F3 is doing a better job than the F1 in my opinion. We know what you guys think to that. The F3 is doing a better job. Definitely. Quite surprised at that. Quite surprised the F1's looking jittery. It might look better in post, we'll see. 1080p 30. 1080p 30. And there's a clear winner here, the POCO F3.
It's filming my bum.
Hey.
You're filming my bum.
POCO 3 looks much better. Saturation, colour and exposure much better. So I think after this comparison of the F1 and the F3, there's 3 years between them, you know, in terms of technology and how it's advanced. The only thing that's limiting the F1 is obviously hardware. But after testing, I wouldn't say there's 3 years difference, or it's 3 years better than the F1. The F1 has produced some decent quality footage and video and obviously picture capabilities. It can shoot up to 4K 60, whereas the F3 can't. But like I said, MIUI 12, they removed the stabilisation within there. I'm pretty sure they did. I'm pretty sure. So I think the POCO F1 in 2021 is still a good phone to consider. I think in performance, it will deal blows against the F3. It's definitely no slouch. So thanks very much for watching. I'd love to hear your ideas and thoughts on this comparison between the two. What are your thoughts? Which would you prefer? If you have any questions, then pop them down below. I'll answer them as best as I can. But if you enjoyed this video and would like to see more smartphone videos, unboxing and reviews, then do please consider subscribing. I'll see you very soon. Bye bye.